We're now moving towards the fifth and final session, which is called Labour Availability, Skills and Capabilities. We've talked about various aspects of the gas and oil industry, and one which is crucially important, of course, is to secure a workforce. And I'm sure all of you would know that in the previous years there have been some serious layoffs, not least in the UK. Alex, will you please join me up here? And I'll briefly introduce you as Dr. Alex Thom. Yeah. And you've been with Oil and Gas UK since late 2011.
That's right.
And you're in charge of the skills and employment issues. Well, you're a skills and employment issues manager. And you know all about what's going on in the UK in terms of layoffs, etc. So initially, just take us through how bad is the situation in terms of the conditions for the workforce in the UK?
It would be wrong to say that anyone's having a particularly good time at the moment. By the end of this year, we will probably have seen the UK workforce reduced by 27%. If we put that in figures, that's more than 100,000, probably towards 120,000 people. Now, that includes directly employed in the supply chain, working on exports and induced jobs. And the impact has been felt throughout the country. Although there are particular hubs that have been hit, such as North East Scotland, North East England, East Anglia, for example. But the industry does operate throughout the UK. I'd say certainly at the moment the onshore workforce, which is probably more than 90% of the total workforce, has been harder hit. Several companies have already been through a couple of tranches of redundancies. I mentioned to you this morning, there's another company in the press today going through its third round of cuts, so it has been really difficult. There have been also other changes which have come along, in that a number of the operating companies have changed the offshore rota. And probably the most popular rota was 2 weeks offshore, 3 weeks at home. A number of companies have now moved to equal time, usually 3 weeks offshore, 3 weeks at home, so people are working more time over the year, and that has been incredibly unpopular, perhaps understandably, and certainly resulted in some industrial action. Certainly we had the possibility of 3 strikes last year, which didn't happen, but we have had a strike this year.
Mm-hmm. And we heard 2 of our senior politicians, ministers, on stage here telling us quite reassuringly that they would back up the industry in any possible way, not least in terms of supporting workplaces in Denmark. Now, I wonder, what kind of political dialogue do you, from UK Oil and Gas, have with the respective governments of England and Scotland?
Okay, yeah, as you say, we're blessed with 2. Yeah. So if we start with
Is that a blessing?
So if we start with the Scottish Government, they very quickly set up something called the Energy Jobs Task Force, and that brings together a number of agencies such as Scottish Government, Scottish Enterprise, Skills Development Scotland, and industry leaders to look at what could be done. So that has been meeting now probably for about 18 months and has come up with some initiatives, but in reality the numbers have not been large. And we have this tension really, because what they are looking at is how do they find jobs for people, how do they redeploy people, and there is a tension, of course, how we also want to keep people in the industry. Mm-hmm. But so that workforce has been working really hard, and it's come up with some schemes such as a loan scheme, so looking at how can companies who have some really good talent but can't find work for them at the moment, how can we perhaps match them up with a company, or possibly even in the public sector or in the third sector, who could use that person for 6 months, 12 months or a year, and they can come to an arrangement about costs. That's one thing that's been set up. There's also a transition training fund which the Scottish Government has allocated, and individuals can apply via Skills Development Scotland for training to either upskill themselves in the industry if they have a potential role, or to find something in another sector. When it comes to the UK government, there's a kind of cross-ministerial group headed up by what's now called BEIS, Department of Business, Energy, Innovation and Skills, I think it's. Anyway, so they have set up a cross-ministerial group which has produced an oil and gas workforce plan. So that is looking at things like identifying vacancies in other sectors through a particular tool that they have called Talent Retention Solution. So we're working with them on that, and there's some real opportunities because despite our problems, there are a shortage of engineers in the UK, as in many other countries. So that's looking at perhaps directing people, and indeed directing other sectors to people, from nuclear, from network rail and things like that. So there are a number of initiatives which are going on. We're also talking just tomorrow, in fact, with them about how can we get better at modelling what our workforce needs will be, because the other underlying conversation, and I think it's been touched on today, is how do we make sure we're ready when things improve, albeit it doesn't look as if that's going to be any time very soon. How do we make sure we have the right skills retained in the industry?
And speaking of that, you talk about the shortage of engineers. We just heard two gentlemen from academia. I wonder, how do you, from UK Oil and Gas, work together with, say, or what kind of cooperation do you have with universities, colleges and the like?
We have a lot of cooperation in a number of different ways. Some companies fund chairs. Companies and some of the professional institutes like IMechE, etc., will work with universities and colleges to develop courses. So there are a number of courses that people can take that are pretty specific for our industry. We have links with Ian's organisation, for example, and we will have with the new Oil and Gas Technology Centre, which is just being set up. So we're very keen to maintain and build on those links.
Right, and given the situation you're in, what do you consider, and this may be, for Danes to apply, what do you consider to be sort of the most useful approach you've taken?
Following the downturn?
Yes, following the downturn.
Oh, that's a really difficult one. I think one of the things that we've learned the hard way is how important it is to take the workforce with you. Now, I'm not saying that's Oil and Gas UK, because clearly the people involved are not our workforce. But with hindsight, a number of companies, I think, could have implemented some of their changes in a more consultative way, and I think that they would admit that themselves. So we do have a problem with low morale, which we need to help our members address.
And how do you address low morale?
I think it's encouraging, pointing out to our members and encouraging them to use best practices when it comes to workforce engagement, that when they talk about consulting with their workforce, it is genuine consultation and not a case of deferring implementation of a decision for 30 days or 45 days, whatever the law says. And also building in a mechanism for listening to employees. So particularly the offshore population, I think, feels it's been done to and not involved. So it's how do we turn that around?
I think I'd like to call on Martin Nesby to join us on stage, Managing Director of Oil Gas Denmark. I'm sure all of you know him. Martin, you've been listening, and of course you know about this problem. So please share with us some reflections on the Danish situation as compared to the UK situation, and perhaps also tell us a little bit about your worries for the future in terms of the workforce.
Yes, I think there is one of the differences in the magnitude of scale. Obviously, with 450,000 employees in the oil and gas sector in the UK, including the induced jobs, it's a different industry altogether. We have today released a report, and we assume that we have 15,000 employees, and that corresponds to 12,700 full-time employees. And on top of that, we got the induced jobs. So altogether, that will about 34,000 jobs altogether, including the induced jobs. So it's a different situation. So that's one difference, of course. And with 120,000 people being laid off, losing their jobs, and obviously you need to have a number of initiatives. So that kind of initiatives we haven't really seen the need for that in Denmark yet. Remains to be seen. But and so that's one difference, a magnitude of scale.
To be quite honest, Martin, are you worried that this could take place in Denmark? Of course, not on the same scale, but that it might happen.
Yes, I think that what we've seen until now is that other industries, and in particular the wind industry, that a number of our members, they have a leg in both of those industries, and they've been able to sort of suck up those people. But it's a huge challenge for, in particular, Esbjerg, of course, because around 45% of the jobs are over there. And if we in Denmark would see an industry which is further challenged by infrastructure not being rebuilt and etc., that we do not see in the investment that we need, then obviously this problem will be a massive problem for us.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if both of you, and you've touched upon it, if both of you can explain to a perfect outsider and stranger such as me that how come you have a recruitment problem in the industry? Because I hear, I mean, you're looking for qualified engineers, indeed for engineers, and you have talked about recruitment problems. Also, you've written that in the text today. Yet there are redundancies. People are being laid off. So, I mean, how does this add up?
It's a very interesting question. Mm-hmm. And when we started out the strategy work a couple of years back, we were coming out of a very high activity level. Mm-hmm. So we were looking for skilled people at all with all kind of competences, and there was a huge recruitment challenge. Then the downturn came, and that was then people were laid off, and the situation changed. But it doesn't alter the fact that we, on the longer term, we have a structural challenge because
what do you mean by structural?
What we mean is that we don't see enough people going into taking the Master of Science and going into the technical disciplines, and that's in Denmark, for example, IDA, the Association for the Engineers, they have calculated that a huge number of engineers will be needed in the future, and that will hit the oil and gas industry certainly. So there's a structural change. We don't see enough people going into those and getting those competences.
And both of you, also you, Alex, what do you think should be done? What could be done, perhaps politically and in social terms, to ensure that you as an industry can recruit and get more manpower? More qualified, I might add.
Right. Well, certainly we're not looking for large numbers of people at the moment, but there will always be technical specialists who are difficult to find, and very senior project managers, for example. So we are doing a lot of work on developing competencies there. But I think, you know, we've always had a great story to tell as an industry. It's technically exciting, it's challenging, it's really pushed the boundaries. There is opportunity for travel, it's very well rewarded. So we do have a good story to tell. Where we're going to have the challenges where people have felt, I think, and we've seen it before actually when we've had downturns, that people have had such a negative experience of how it was dealt with that they don't want to come back. But earlier this year, we have an industry-wide apprenticeship scheme, and we had 750 applicants for 50 places. So we're convinced that it's still seen as an attractive industry.
Martin?
Well, listening to what was just discussed before this session, how innovative this industry is. We've been looking into the image of the industry, and it has been confirmed that people think we're in sunset industry. It's gray-haired men who are looking at production of oil and gas. We don't need it. We need to go green, and we're not innovative. So the general perception is that we're not an innovative industry, and we are very innovative, and we've been very poor at telling that story. So I agree with them very much. So we need to tell that story.
So what's the answer to that? Hire some long-haired hippies, members of Alternative, the Danish party? You shouldn't look at me. No, I mean, seriously, because I mean, you address it perfectly. So what is the answer to that?
Well, I don't think there is any one answer. I think there are a number of initiatives that we need to look at. And if you look at sort of if you have a total population of all students, there's a sort of a funnel, and then we've got the very few who enter or end up in the oil and gas industry. So why is it that they leave, and why is it that they're not interested in the technical disciplines? Why is it that they're not interested in the oil and gas business? And I think there'll be a number of questions. I think image is one of them. But that also raises all kind of issues. So what does that really mean? And given that Denmark is going to be fossil independent or fossil free, so what does that mean, and how do we overcome that and explain that it is an interesting industry? So it's so I think you could do branding campaigns, but it's not very easy. There's no low-hanging fruits. But that's one thing. Another thing is that to make sure that attracting and retaining competences should remain a priority within the companies, so that it's on a, it remains attractive to be in a company. And that's also not very easy, given that there is a price constraint. Collaboration among the oil companies could be another way of dealing with, making sure we could take in young people, and then in turn they could work among the oil companies, for example, and among the suppliers. So I think we need to think carefully about how to deal with this. But I don't think there's any one very easy question.
No,
answer to that.
I'd agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when we had the recruitment challenges 2 or 3 years ago, it wasn't at apprenticeship and graduate level. It was kind of mid-career, because we compete globally for labour. And Aberdeen or Singapore, what are you going to choose? So
Esbjerg is very attractive.
Yeah. So there is that issue, and you did. We touched on the fact that not enough people are doing engineering and maths and things like that. One of the initiatives that we have just done is we worked with Aberdeen University, and they have just taken on 22 workers from oil and gas who have been made redundant to train as STEM teachers.
Right.
So they're going to go. They're the first cohort, and we've got the funding from the Scottish Government.
But Martin, I think you said, and I should remind all of you that you can just join the conversation if you like. But Martin, you talk about the image of the industry as such, and you say there's no easy answer to that, and there's a structural problem also in terms of recruitment, etc. But really, if you want to change the image of the industry, I mean, how do you go about doing that?
Well, I think establishing Oil Gas Denmark is one way of the industry dealing with that. And we've only been around for a couple of years, since 2012. And as an example, as we today have produced a magazine, we produced a magazine in 2013, I think it was, where there was a barrel of oil on the front page stating "Made in Denmark." And a number of politicians, they were really provoked by this. We are not an oil and gas nation. We are a wind nation or knowledge nation, etc. So we, as mentioned by the minister today, we've been self-sufficient in oil and gas supply since mid-90s, and no one knows. And I think we have to look at ourselves as an industry. We haven't been very good at telling that story, coming back to the storytelling, and obviously that's part of our job, to come out and tell that story and do that. Both to the political system, and what we see is there's actually a lot of appetite for learning more. So we have a very good dialogue with also in the ministries and with the politicians and with the public in general to talk about the industry and the value contribution. And I don't think there will ever be an industry that people love, but we will be an industry that is necessary, and we contribute with tax, workplaces, and self-sufficient oil and gas supply.
And pension schemes.
Pension
schemes.
And do you see the same? I mean, we heard Ian say that the gas and oil industry, really, at the end of the day, they're not very good at embracing alternative methods, not at this point at least. So they are not seen as front runners for the future. And when you talk to your members, I mean, is that even a talk you have? Like, remember, guys, be open to alternative solutions, embrace the future, be more green, blah, 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 low carbon.
Well, what we see is that among our members, that they already have activities within, let's say, the green and alternative energy. So there is a focus on that already. We are not dealing with that in Oil Gas Denmark, because our purpose is to make sure we get the most value out of the North Sea, so to speak. But our members certainly realize that not only is there a good business case for the industry in Denmark, value contribution, tax, workplace, etc., but we also need to look at the green, and And as also mentioned by the ministers, it's not a question of either or, but both and.
But maybe that's one of the things you should touch upon, because now you say our job is to get as much out of the North Sea as possible, which to the outer world, the public out there, is seen as, greedy capitalism. Whereas your story would be to say, look, we've actually contributed quite a lot in terms of tax money. I mean, not just quite a lot, really, really serious astronomical amounts. And this is often perhaps forgotten in the story.
Yeah, I think, and what we hear is, for example, that people say we don't want to be dependent on the North Sea. But what we try to explain is that if we don't exploit the resources in the North Sea, we'll be dependent on resources from other countries. So we would rather produce it ourselves and thereby securing tax payments, workplaces, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with all of that. The industry's has made a huge contribution to society in the UK, and will continue to do so. It's very much about, as you mentioned, the mix, and helping people understand that. I mean, one of the challenges we have at the moment is even in universities, there's a growing hostility to us. We funded a unit at Kiel University that trained teachers to deliver earth sciences. It was a really great project that had been running for 12 years, but then we had to leave because it was against the kind of ethos and the green policies of the university. So we had to pack our bags. It's very sad.
Right, yes, certainly is sad. We take a question from the audience. Alex, do you want water?
My name is Amin, and I'm a student assistant in Maersk Oil, and I study petroleum engineering at DTU. And this downturn and disruption in the oil industry has given me some thought about my career and my future. And my question is an open question, but what would your career advice be for me? Because I have seen that graduate position in the entire industry has been reduced by several amounts, and I'm just been concerned about what should I do to come into this industry.
He wants a job.
Yeah. In 2017.
Fair enough.
So, you got any?
My advice to the industry is to attract and retain skilled competences as a high priority. I therefore think that you should keep on studying and make sure the best in class. And I'm sure there'll be a job for you. I'm sure there's a job on the long term as well. I think there's the potential in the Danish sector of the North Sea is huge, and I'm sure that we'll find, as also confirmed by the ministers today, we'll find solutions in terms of making sure we get all of that potential up. So I think you have a great career, and I don't think it should be in doubt.
Yeah, I'd agree. Our major companies are really putting a premium on trying to hold on to their graduates, and we'll be recruiting more. It's important, though, not whatever your discipline, to think about making yourself employable, because there'll be many people walking out with that certificate and that qualification. And what we're hearing a lot from companies is they want people with the right soft skills, with team working capabilities, some insight into project management, and those kind of things. So make sure you get around at opportunities you can while you're at university.
I think also we heard today that even though Denmark has an ambition of being fossil free or fossil independent in 2050, it's also been said that we need to, if there is still reserve, we still need to produce it. So I know that there's been a prognosis from the DEA setting a sort of an end date, but we also heard that we've seen that the last oil should be produced in 1995 or whatever, and still we are running on fossils and fuel in the world. So that date keeps on being extended. So don't panic.
No, I guess that's what we've been hearing since Troels entered the stage about 4 hours ago. Don't panic. The situation is not entirely bleak, of course. There is a disruption in the industry, but nothing is going to fall down immediately or decline as it is. But still, Alex, everyone here is perhaps geared up for new challenges. I wonder, what advice could you give your colleagues in the Danish oil and gas industry, given the situation you are witnessing in the UK?
Okay, I guess there's a couple of things. I'd go back to what I said earlier about making sure you take the workforce with you, and I think you're probably more of a socially democratic culture perhaps than we are, but that is...
Communist.
No. I chose my words carefully. So that is really important. And I think one of the things that we've found is, how can you put this diplomatically? There are many people who wish to help, and then you find that energy gets dissipated because you have so many groups being set up to look at different things. So try and coordinate efforts around any initiatives.
And if you were to say that undiplomatically, how would that sound? More directly. I mean, you're in a group of friends. Don't mind diplomacy.
Sometimes there are just too many cooks.
Right, okay. It's more easily understood. Martin, seen from, of course, seen through your lens, but when you look at the UK situation, you did comment on it initially, but I just wonder what lesson you derive from what is going on in the UK.
It's been very interesting to hear about the concrete projects that you have put out to sale, and it would be interesting to have a further. We are already talking to Oil and Gas UK, and we're already learning from you. A much bigger organisation. You've been there for 40 years.
But not me personally.
No, sorry. And obviously, lessons could be learned. At this stage, we don't see 100,000 people being laid off, so it's a different situation. But we are, of course, talking also to our members. How can we deal with this? And
exactly, that's what I meant.
And I think that in the outset, what we heard the companies said was that we shouldn't repeat what we did back in the end of the 90s when we had a downturn as well, and people were laid off. And so let's keep the talent. But it gets difficult once the oil price is coming down, and you see that the profit is disappearing, and it gets increasingly difficult. So you have to react on that, of course. So we're seeing some of the mistakes, but now at least some of the effort and the discussions are now taking place in a industry organization, and we are having those discussions, and how can we deal with that, and how can we solve this dilemma where we on the short term see redundancy, and on the longer term we see the structural challenge.
Right. I wonder if there is any two final questions from anyone in the audience. Anyone who wants to earn a glass of white wine? Yes.
Just a comment, really, Ed, from IOGP. Obviously, we work fairly closely with Oil and Gas Denmark. Really, it's just a call to the industry. We have strategy refreshers, Oil and Gas UK do, Oil and Gas Denmark do. To me, it's as though the industry needs to have a strategy refresh and focus on the exceptional amount of cost that is being wasted. And really, I don't know, maybe some thoughts about how we work better together as an industry to save ourselves in the long run.
Brilliant question. Martin?
It's a very good point. And albeit it may sound easy, let's collaborate. We also see, in terms of recruitment, we see a lot of competition. We see there's a global competition for talent. So there's a lot of competition going on. But I'll take you on your word, and invite you for coffee and to come and present your good ideas.
Dear me, it's a great conference. One guy gets offered a job, another one gets a cup of coffee.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a good idea. Alex?
Well, certainly at Oil and Gas UK, we're doing a huge amount to try and facilitate that collaboration. And we've set something up called the Efficiency Task Force, and that's got 3 streams of work looking at standardization, business processes, and culture and behaviors. So, I mean, it's not easy by any means, but that has had some success and is continuing to work really hard. And the next phase is about how do we engage the workforce much more directly in the efficiency agenda. But you're right, we're all in this together, and that's but we do have some challenges around certain company cultures, and particularly in the UK, competition law is a big issue for us.
Right, that used to be debated among yourselves back home in what used to be part of Europe. Anyway. Okay.
Let's not go there.
Thank you very much, Martin and Alex, for joining me up here.
Thank you.
Thank you.